After completing this chapter, the learner will, with reference to MARPOL Annex 4, know the goals of MARPOL Annex 4, be aware what Annex 4 classes as sewage, be aware of the effects of sewage in the sea, be aware of the kind of operational discharges of sewage that may occur and the restrictions placed on them, be aware that Annex 4 has defined a special area, be aware of the kind of accidental discharges of sewage that may occur and the measures in place to minimize them. The main goal of MARPOL Annex 4 is to reduce the harm to the environment from sewage from ships. MARPOL Annex 4 classes sewage as drainage and other wastes from any form of toilets and urinals, drainage from wash basins, wash tubs and scuppers in medical premises, or drainage from spaces containing living animals. When sewage gets into the sea, it tends to cause two main problems. Untreated sewage can contain bacteria, parasites and viruses. Sewage pollution around swimming areas and shellfish beds poses risks to human and fish health. Shellfish feed by filtering particles from the water, concentrating bacteria and viruses from the water, which increases the risk of disease in consumers if the shellfish are eaten raw or partially cooked. Some of the fish will be eaten by larger fish, passing along bacteria and viruses. Sickness, diarrhea, ear, nose and throat infections are common results, as well as the occasional more serious infection. Sewage will naturally decompose in the environment. In enclosed waters, such as harbours or estuaries, the oxygen consumed by the decaying sewage can leave the dissolved oxygen levels in the water so low that fish cannot breathe, and they therefore die. The ship's sewage system must collect the sewage produced on board so that the overboard discharge can be controlled to meet the discharge criteria set by Annex 4. At the time of writing this module, Annex 4 has no special areas. However, there are plans to introduce them. Overboard discharge of sewage from passenger ships will be banned within special areas unless an approved treatment plant is used. Annex 4 has no specific requirements for records to be kept. In practice, it is difficult to prove to an inspector that discharges were made legally unless records are kept of times when the system was set to pump, to flow overboard, or when it was set to be collected on board. The discharge criteria depend on the kind of treatment plant. The treatment options are a sewage treatment plant, which will cause the sewage to break down to the extent that no visible solids can be seen in the outlet, a sewage comminuting and disinfecting system, or a holding tank of sufficient capacity for the retention of all sewage. Click on the buttons to learn more. When sewage is treated with a sewage treatment plant, Annex 4 places no restrictions on discharges. But in practice, ships may be subject to national laws within some countries which ban sewage discharges even when treated. Sewage treated in a sewage comminuting and disinfecting system may be discharged overboard if the ship meets the MARPOL requirements for distance from land. If the ship is too close to land, then the sewage must be stored on board. These systems will not be allowed to be used on passenger ships while they are in special areas. If the sewage is untreated, then it must be held on board until the ship meets the MARPOL requirements for distance from land. This is further out than required for ships with a sewage comminuting and disinfecting system. When far enough away from land, sewage can be allowed to flow directly overboard. The holding tank can also be discharged overboard. The rate of tank discharge is controlled to try to ensure efficient mixture of the sewage in the water. Perhaps the most likely accidental discharge of sewage would be the overflow of a holding tank. Annex 4 seeks to reduce this risk by requiring holding tanks to have a means to indicate visually the amount of its contents, so that the rate of filling can be monitored. When the tank is nearly full, it can be emptied, either overboard in accordance with the discharge criteria, or ashore via the standard shore discharge connection, which is required to be fitted to all ships, to the reception facilities that states are required to provide. We have now reached the end of this chapter on MARPOL Annex 4. We have considered the main goal of Annex 4, what MARPOL Annex 4 means by sewage, the likely sources of operational and of accidental pollution, and how Annex 4 tries to prevent harmful amounts of pollution from both sources. After completing this chapter, the learner will, with reference to MARPOL Annex 5, know the goals of MARPOL Annex 5, be aware what Annex 5 defines as garbage, be aware of the effects of garbage in the sea, be aware of the kind of operational discharges of garbage that may occur and the restrictions placed upon them, be aware that Annex 5 defines special areas, be aware of the kind of accidental discharges of garbage that may occur and the measures in place to minimize them. The main goal of MARPOL Annex 5 is to reduce the harm to the environment from garbage from ships. Annex 5 of MARPOL defines garbage as all kinds of food, domestic and operational waste, excluding fresh fish, generated during the normal operation of the ship, whether disposed of continuously or at intervals. Plastics, cooking oil, fishing gear, animal carcasses and cargo residues are among those substances specifically defined as garbage by Annex 5. Cargo residues and slurries, such as those produced by hold washing, are classed as garbage, except where they are substances listed under the other annexes to MARPOL. Deck wash water is also considered as garbage. Plastic presents the greatest danger to marine life because of the time it takes to break down. Fish and marine mammals can sometimes mistake plastics for food, and can become trapped in plastic ropes, nets and bags. Other items, such as cans and small containers, can be washed up and attract the attention of birds and mammals, sometimes resulting in them being trapped and starving to death. Research has found that food waste eaten by fish may harm their health. If discharged in sufficient quantities, food waste can decrease oxygen levels in the water, causing fish to die, reduce water quality by increasing cloudiness, encourage the growth of algae into algal blooms that can block out sunlight from underwater plants or be toxic to humans and animals. Floating garbage can be a hazard to the navigation of small boats. Some garbage soon breaks down, but other materials take much longer. Click on the hotspot to see how long it takes some materials to break down. Garbage is constantly being produced around the ship during its operation. Most of these wastes will be collected on board in some way before discharge, but some, such as food wastes in a galley fitted with a comminutor or grinder, may be discharged overboard on an almost continual basis. All but very small ships must carry a garbage management plan. The company must designate one person to be in charge of carrying out the plan, which will give instructions for the collection, processing, and storage of garbage before its disposal. Increasingly, the company policy will call for garbage to be recycled. However, Annex 5 makes no demands for this. Annex 5 applies restrictions on discharges of garbage from ships. Some are general, and others depend on whether the ship is inside or outside an Annex 5 special area. A special area is declared by the IMO where, for reasons of its nature and its sea traffic, special mandatory methods for the prevention of sea pollution by garbage are required. The MARPOL Annex 5 special areas are listed in the current edition of MARPOL. Garbage is not to be disposed of into the sea except where allowed by Annex 5. No cooking oil or plastics can be discharged into the sea anywhere. Plastics include synthetic ropes, synthetic fishing nets, plastic garbage bags, and incinerator ash from plastic products which may contain toxic or heavy metal residues. Remember that when garbage is mixed, all of it is considered as being made up of the material with the most strict discharge requirements, and it must be disposed of accordingly. All garbage in a plastic bag is therefore considered to be plastic and cannot be discharged into the sea anywhere. MARPOL Annex 1 controls the discharge of oil into the sea. Oily rags must be kept on board until discharged to reception facilities or incinerated. While the ship is outside a special area, only garbage discharges into the sea of food, animal carcasses or unrecoverable cargo residues are allowed. The ship must be en route, as far as practicable from the nearest land, but at least the distance from the nearest land set out in MARPOL. Cleaning agents or additives contained in wash water may be discharged into the sea, provided they are not harmful to the marine environment. While the ship is inside a special area, the discharge overboard of even food waste is prohibited, unless it has been ground down. MARPOL contains limits on the distance from land and the size of the food waste that can be disposed of into the sea. Cargo residues contained in wash water may be discharged if the strict conditions in MARPOL are met. Overboard discharge of deck washdown water is allowed if non-harmful. Garbage discharges of any kind within the Antarctic area are discouraged, and ships should have the capacity to store garbage until the next port with reception facilities. MARPOL distances are measured from the edge of the ice shelf rather than land. There are special requirements for discharge of garbage within 500 meters of fixed or floating platforms used for exploiting seabed resources. All but very small ships must complete a garbage record book. The record book contains a list of the operations to be recorded and the codes for the various garbage categories to use when making entries. Recordable operations include garbage discharges, ashore or into the sea, garbage incineration, accidental discharges of garbage. Wherever possible, a receipt specifying the estimated amount of garbage transferred should be obtained and kept with the record book. Accidental discharges of garbage are likely to occur when an inappropriate discharge is made, that is, someone on board disposes of something into the sea without realizing it is garbage, or that the ship is not in the right geographical position for the materials to be discharged legally, or garbage is lost overboard during bad weather. All ships over 12 meters in length and fixed or floating platforms must display placards which show the crew and any passengers the garbage disposal requirements. Where the ship or platform has a garbage management plan, the person responsible for its implementation should ensure that all of the ship's officers and crew understand and comply with the requirements. Training may be needed to achieve this. Annex 5 provides a defense in the case of accidental discharges. If the escape of garbage resulting from damage to a ship or its equipment, provided all reasonable precautions have been taken before and after the occurrence of the damage for the purpose of preventing or minimizing the escape. Note that it is unlikely that this would cover the loss of garbage bags washed off a deck. The accidental loss of fishing gear is similarly allowed for. We have now reached the end of this chapter on MARPOL Annex 5. We have considered the main goal of Annex 5, what MARPOL Annex 5 means by garbage, the likely sources of operational and of accidental pollution, and how Annex 5 tries to prevent harmful amounts of pollution from both sources.